often find myself speaking in English when I want to talk about something personal. Some people might assume that using a foreign language is a way of sounding smarter, more interesting, or somehow more impressive. But for me, it's almost the opposite. In a strange way, I become more honest when I speak in English. Whenever I try to talk about my feelings in Korean, something in me tightens. Even when I'm sharing something relatively small, it can feel as if I'm standing in the middle of the crowded street with all my clothes removed. The vulnerability feels immediate, almost physical. The moment I start talking about my thoughts or emotions, I become aware of something else. Not what I'm saying, but how I might be seen, how I might be interpreted, how I might be judged. Too sensitive, too dramatic, looking for attention, playing the victim, strange. What's interesting is that the intensity of those voices become much quieter when I switch to English. It's not that I suddenly become brave. It's not that I stop caring about what people think. It just feels as though a thin layer of glass appears between me and my emotions. They're still there. I can still see them. But I can look at them with a little more distance. There is actually a psychological concept that describes something similar. It's called the foreign language effect. Research suggests that when people use a language that isn't their native one, their emotion responses often becomes less intense. When I first learned about this, it immediately resonated with me. Because our native language is never just a language. It's the language in which we were first praised, the language in which we were first criticized, the language in which we were learned embarrassment, acceptance, rejection, belonging. It carries memories, emotions, entire histories. For me, Korean is not just a tool for communication. It's also the language of relationships, expectations, and social awareness. The language through which I first learned how I was supposed to be seen. English feels different, not because it removes those things entirely, but because it lets me step slightly outside of them. It gives me a small amount of distance, and paradoxically, that distance allows me to be more truthful. I think many people assume that authenticity comes from speaking in the language closest to you, but sometimes I feel the opposite. Sometimes things that are too close become impossible to see clearly. You need a little space, a little distance, not to hide from the truth, but to finally look at it. And maybe that's why I keep returning to English. Not because it hides who I am, but because it gives me just enough distance to get a little closer to myself.